Albuquerque, New Mexico, there was three teenagers were arrested for killing two homeless people. Um, the teenagers were 15 years old, 16 years old, and 18 years old, and they're being charged as adults. Um, what they did was they saw these. They went into the park because there's always a lot of drunk homeless people there. And this is a tradition that's been going on since the 1960s, that a lot of non-Indian teenagers go into this certain park and they look for homeless people who most of the time are Navajo Indians or Diné. And they're alcoholics, they're winos, and they go to that park and they go there to pass out or get drunk or whatever. So it's always a teenage tradition to go there and beat up a drunk Indian. And so to become a part of a certain social group, you have to do that. Yeah, they take you to that park and they say, okay, go beat up a drunk Indian, then you can be cool like us. It's basically what they say. So this, like I said, this has been happening for maybe even in the 1950s. It's been happening, maybe even before that. But this is a sick tradition. It's incredibly racist, and sometimes what they do too is they take shopping carts to a certain hill, and they put drunks in there, and then they push them down the hill and see how far they can go. They do not value the lives of these human beings. They see these drunk Indians as trash that they can do whatever they want with. So a lot of times like I said, they go there. There's probably a lot of unsolved murders that happened in that park. Because maybe they beat the crap out of some Indian and maybe he was still breathing when they left him, but a couple hours later go by and he died from his injuries, internal bleeding or whatever, and they don't know who did it. Yeah, but in this instance, it was they attacked three guys, and one managed to escape, but what these teenagers did is beyond belief, in my opinion. They used metal bars. They used cinder blocks. These are cement blocks, and they kept throwing them at these winos repeatedly, over and over. They pick up these cinder blocks and throw them at the head, throw them at the body, and then they'd laugh. They kept doing that over and over until they died. So the one who escaped notified the police. So the police, the teenagers ran, but the guy that escaped, he knew these kids. I mean, not personally, but he wasn't drunk, so he was able to give a really good description. And they found him. Yeah, they arrested all three of them. So now they're in jail, $5 million bond, and this is it's horrible. It's truly an injustice because this has been happening for over 50 years. Yeah, this is a tradition that non-Indian teenagers go through. And when I don't say white because Mexican teenagers are doing this to Indians. Yeah, black teenagers are doing this to these Indians. Yeah, it's not just white teenagers. It's non-Indian people that are beating the crap out of these Indians just because they're drunks. That is racism. Yeah, and just think of this. This is happening thousands of times, and just think of the thousands of teenagers who got away with this, and what they're going through. What are they? Some of them are probably grandfathers now. And look at the secrets that they're keeping in their closet. Yeah. And I think this needs to be brought more to the attention of the public. And I think hopefully with this case it will, because they caught them. Yeah, this time they caught them, but in the past there was no evidence to go through. Um, it's amazing how non-Indians are when they see Indian people who are drunk, and they do this. Yeah, in America, I remember in Mobridge, South Dakota, when I was in high school, there was a girl who was really a pretty girl. She was a Lakota girl from the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, and they were some people were drinking someplace, and these two white guys. They decided to have fun with this Indian girl. She was already drunk, so they lured her to their pickup truck. They went out into the countryside and they got her really drunk, extremely drunk, and then they proceeded to gang rape her. Yeah, they took turns having sex with her all night long, as much as they could. And before the sun came up, they didn't want. She might remember who she was with. And so what they decided to do was they tied her body to the back of their pickup, and they drug her around, out there in the country, on the country roads of gravel. They drug her around so you couldn't recognize her face. And then they threw her way out in the country someplace, and hoping nobody would ever find her. These were high school guys at the time. Yeah, these are white guys. They're non-Indians. And it just really, that to me was a hate crime. And it just got to me, that how they could just, they could saw this Indian girl as just somebody to fuck, and then kill her like she's worthless. That her life is worthless just because she's an Indian. So nobody knew who did it. Yeah, they eventually found her body, and nobody ever found out who did this to her. So her crime, her case was unsolved for about 15 or 16 years, or maybe it was 20 years. And then this couple in Mobridge, they got into an argument. This is a white couple. And they got into a heated debate, domestic abuse. And the wife went to the police and turned her husband in. And she said, "Do you remember that Indian girl that was raped, and she was dragged around with the pickup truck?" And the cop said, "Yeah." And she said, "My husband was one of the guys who did it, and his best friend was the other one." And it turned out that her husband, his grandfather, was a very, very rich and highly respected citizen of that town. They built a sports arena complex and named it after him. Yeah, the Sioux Arena, it was called. And so the police officer took it serious, and he had every right to check her story out, because he felt that she wasn't making it up, because this police officer was saying that this is a case he always wanted to solve, and this was the first time they had evidence. Yeah, a story. So she took him to the location of where her husband said that they did this, and there they found they found, what did they find? I think it was even after all those years went by, they still found something. Yeah, and I can't remember if it was a ring or something like that that belonged to that girl, and the Indian girl, and I can't remember what it was, but they found evidence, and they arrested the guy on they called him into the police, and at first he denied it, and but the other guy caved in. Yeah, the other guy said he couldn't live with it anymore. He couldn't live with the secret that they were keeping all these years, and he admitted it. He didn't care if he went to prison. He just didn't like living this secret. And so he testified against this grandson of a rich man. And that family did their best to disprove the other guy. Yeah, they're a rich family, so they could afford a fancy lawyer. So they did their best to tear down the story of the man's, but it didn't work. Yeah. So they went to court, and basically they got found guilty, but the crime people felt that their punishment wasn't severe enough. And then came the argument of, what if Indians did this to a white girl? The Indians would probably be sent to prison for the rest of their lives. But because of the fact that it's white guys, an Indian girl, and the punishment they got was not really that severe, it shows to people that if you're white, you can do anything you want, because even if you get caught, your sentence is not going to be that serious. Which is basically saying, hey, it's okay to rape and kill Indian women. Yeah, you just get a slap on the wrist. Yeah, so this is the kind of thing that happens in South Dakota, and anywhere there's Indian people, this is the kind of justice that they get. Now, these boys that killed these, I'm really guessing, but I bet you anything I'm correct in this, that the guys they killed were Indians. That these teenagers are probably going to get a slap on the wrist too. That's my guess. I really don't think they're going to get a serious sentence. But if you turn it around, and if it was Indian kids that were doing this to white homeless people, these Indian kids, I guarantee you, will be sent to prison for the rest of their life. Why is it that way? Why does the justice system in America go against Indian people? No matter which way you look at it. Yeah? It basically says it's okay to kill Indians. That Indians are worthless. So, when you look at that kind of information, and then you see you read a story of an Indian guy who maybe he got his doctorate degree. He's a doctor. And let's say he discovers the cure for AIDS. Do you think he's going to really be seen as a hero in America? Probably not. People are going to say, oh, but he must have been assisted by somebody smarter. Because they cannot... The general feeling in America is that Indians are not capable of doing such great feats. Yeah? That's the general feeling, the consensus towards Indian people in America, that no matter how fantastic things you accomplish in your life as an Indian, the non-Indian society is going to find fault with it. That's just the way it is. So you have to, when you're an Indian, living in America, you have to try. You have to go extra to prove that you can do the job, whatever it is, to prove your worth. We have to do more to prove our worth than other people do. Why is it? Why does it have to be that way? Why are Indians seen in such a low light in America? And when we try to rise, they push us down right away. They don't want us to be on the same level as them. Why is it? I think that's something that really needs to be brought out more, because a lot of people don't realize that this is really, really a problem. If you look in American sports teams, what culture do some sports teams make fun of? Indians. They don't make fun of blacks. They don't make fun of Mexicans. They don't make fun of Asian people. But they make fun of Indians. Why is that acceptable? Why is it unacceptable to have a football team called the Washington Niggers, but yet it's acceptable to have that football team called the Washington Redskins? Do you see what I mean? America only makes fun of Indians, but they don't make fun of any other ethnic group. Why is that acceptable? Yeah, things are starting to change. I mean, they have a court case that they won against the Washington Redskins, and I don't know how long that's going to go. Because they're appealing it. Yeah, they won the court case against the Washington Redskins for using a racist name, because the term Redskins is incredibly racist. But most people say, no, it's not. We're honoring Indians. How are they honoring Indians when they're making fun of us? When they're making us into cartoons? Yeah? So it's a question I pose to American people. Why is it okay to make fun of Indians, but it's not okay to make fun of other cultures? That needs to change. Yeah? Food for thought. Something to ponder, something to think about. So, I hope that day comes. Yeah? I mean, it's starting to. It's starting to come. I mean, you see big sports organizations like the NCAA, the National College of, how does that stand for? National College Athletic Association, I think it's called. That they're now putting on very high penalties for any sports team that uses Native Americans or Indian people as mascots. In North Dakota, it's horrible up there. You have I think it's the University of North Dakota that they have parties, basically, drink like an Indian kind of parties. So they're reinforcing or perpetuating the stereotype that all Indians are winos, that all Indians are drunks. So they go to these parties, and the parties are like dress up like a drunk Indian party. So they come in, Indian feathers and painted all kinds of ridiculous colors, and wearing stupid Indian clothes, just horrible. And they go there and say, this is the get drunk like an Indian party. Now, how is that not racist? Yeah, the university didn't do anything in the beginning until some Indian students said something about it. If these Indian students didn't say anything about it, the university would have just let it happen. Do you see what I mean? Why is it that American institutions that are supposed to be honorable allow for racism against Indians to occur? They just allow it until some Indian complains, and then they say something? Why don't they just say something before somebody has to complain about it? If it was against black people, shit, they're going to get on these students immediately and kick them out of school. Yeah? But when it comes to Indian people, they say it's okay. They even go so far as to say, we're honoring the Indians. How is calling a party a drink like an Indian party honoring Indian people? That's racism. And that mentality is a family tradition in North Dakota. Yeah, it's a family tradition to be racist. To make fun of Indians is a family tradition. It's a university tradition now to make fun of and hate Indian people. So when these same students, when they see Indians walking around on the streets, they cuss at them, they throw trash at them. That needs to stop. Yeah, that town needs to say, hey, you can't act like that here. That school needs to say, we're throwing you out. But they're not doing it. Yeah? North Dakota is I know South Dakota is racist, but North Dakota, I think, is a little bit more racist than South Dakota towards Indian people. When you live there, it's really hard to communicate from your sacred center because all around you is racism. How can you take the time to get to know somebody when automatically they're calling you a fucking Indian right from the start? It's hard for a person who's healthy to live there because there's nothing there to interact with. Only racism, only racists. Yeah, so just some thoughts, yeah, something to think about, and I think it would be good for each one of us to take a look at our own selves, and are we doing something similar? Yeah, are we, when we see a woman wearing a burqa, are we automatically saying, oh, well, I don't like those people? If we're saying that, then we have a problem too. And that needs to be worked on, because if we just let it be, it's going to be like an infection, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and we're going to get incredibly sick from it, and we're going to become incredibly closed-minded because of that. And we're going to be hurting a lot of people and not even be aware of it. But we're still responsible for that, yeah? What we do going to come back to us 4 times as strong. So these are some things to be concerned about, in my opinion.